History remembers many fragmented German states, but a key role in their unification was played by a country that no longer exists on today's political map. Without it, modern Germany would not exist. That country was Prussia, a powerful nation that for centuries stood at the center of European history. The story of Prussia begins long before it rose to political prominence. The Baltic branch of the Indo-European language family settled in the region that would later carry the name Prussia, in honor of one of its tribes, even before the Great Migration era. These tribes lived in what is now northern Poland, the Kaliningrad region of Russia, and parts of Lithuania. Ancient authors like Tacitus mention them, calling them the Osti, while the term Prussians appeared later in chronicles of the 12th century. The exact origin of the name remains uncertain, but it likely came from their own self-designation. For centuries, the early Prussians lived independently, despite frequent raids from both Germanic and Slavic neighbors. They never developed a centralized state, lacking a formal system of governance or administration. Instead, their society was organized around tribal elders and military leaders. The daily life of these early people reflected the patterns of a typical European tribe. They practiced agriculture, animal husbandry, hunting, and fishing. Their homes were wooden structures, often protected by ramparts or ditches. Their economy centered on grain cultivation, livestock farming, especially horse breeding, and the amber trade, which became a defining resource of the region. Because the Prussians did not have a centralized army, their territories were vulnerable to more organized enemies. They fought with simple weapons like spears, axes, and bows, often wearing only light leather or fabric armor. Their alliances were temporary, formed either to defend their homeland or to raid neighboring lands. The Prussian language belonged to the Baltic group, closely related to modern Latvian and Lithuanian. Sadly, the language disappeared over time due to Germanization and assimilation, surviving today only in a handful of preserved records. Religion also played a central role in Prussian life before Christianization. They practiced paganism, worshipping gods such as Poyo, ruler of death and the underworld, Punas, god of thunder and lightning, and Potmpo, god of the seas and crops. They honored sacred trees, stones, and springs, while their priests, known as Vitelotas, presided over rituals. The sacred grove of Romuva was the heart of their worship, believed to house a shrine dedicated to the supreme deity. Surrounded by more powerful neighbors, the Slavs, Germans, and Lithuanians, the Prussians constantly faced both opportunities for raids and the threat of conquest. In the early Middle Ages, conflicts and battles became a defining part of their survival, shaping the story of a people who would one day give their name to a kingdom that changed European history forever. After a victory in the early 8th century, the Prussians established the trade and craft center of Trousseau near the Nogat River, close to modern-day Elbląg. But prosperity did not last. By the late 9th century, Viking raids destroyed Trousseau, and in the late 10th century, the Prussians faced invasions from the Rus under Sviatoslav I and from the Poles under Mieszko I. Both powers sought to expand their influence, and Prussian lands became a frequent target. Despite these threats, the Prussians remained defiant. They regularly raided their neighbors, especially the Poles, while gradually becoming more organized and gaining access to improved weaponry through trade. Their forested homeland and decentralized tribal structure made them difficult to conquer outright. The Poles could neither fully subdue them nor negotiate effectively with their fragmented leadership. This stalemate set the stage for a turning point in Prussia history. In 1226, Duke Conrad of Masovia invited the Teutonic Order to fight against the Prussians. This military-religious order, originally founded during the Third Crusade to aid pilgrims in the Holy Land, had transformed into a formidable force similar to the Templars. Known for discipline and experience in warfare, the Teutonic Knights seemed the perfect allies. Conrad granted the order land in Chelmno between the Vistula and Druica rivers, expecting them to remain dependent on him. However, he underestimated their ambitions. In the same year, Emperor Frederick II issued the Golden Bull of Rimini, granting the Teutonic Order full sovereignty over any lands they conquered. This allowed the Knights to establish their own independent state, one that soon grew into a major threat to Poland and neighboring regions. The conquest of Prussia by the Teutonic Order was brutal and prolonged. Over several decades, The knights built strongholds such as Tarunya and Marienburg, which became key centers of their power. The Prussians resisted fiercely, often using guerrilla tactics and even allying with the Lithuanians and rebellious Pomeranians. The most famous resistance was the Great Prussian Uprising, led by Hercus Monti, a Prussian noble educated in German lands. Using his knowledge of German warfare, Monti organized a determined revolt, but the uprising was eventually crushed by the superior organization and resources of the knights. By the mid-13th century, the Teutonic Order had subdued most of Prussia. The native population was Christianized, their lands colonized by German settlers, and over time, the Prussians were gradually assimilated. By the 14th century, only small isolated groups of Baltic Prussians remained, and they too eventually merged into Polish and German cultures. Although the original Prussian people faded, their legacy endured in place names, archaeological remains, and chronicles. The very name Prussia survived, carried forward by the Teutonic Order, whose powerful military state would later shape the destiny of Central and Eastern Europe. The knights themselves were more than warriors. Bound by vows of poverty, celibacy, and obedience, they operated as both a religious brotherhood and a centralized military state. With their grandmaster at the head, they managed not only military campaigns but also the economic and administrative life of their territories. Their disciplined forces and modern weaponry made them one of the most formidable powers in medieval Europe, threatening Poland, Lithuania, and even, at times, the Kievan Rus. Initially, the Teutonic Knights fought against the Baltic tribes, the last Europeans to preserve their pagan faith. By 1337, the order had crushed the final centers of Prussian resistance, with decisive battles fought in present-day Latvia. Just a decade later, in 1348, the Knights defeated the Lithuanians at the Battle of Streva, one of many clashes in their long struggle with the Grand Duchy of Lithuania over control of the Baltic coast. This victory expanded Teutonic influence in northwestern Prussia and opened new territories for German settlement. But their most formidable opponent remained Lithuania, then still the largest pagan power in Europe. Pressured by the Knights, the Lithuanians sought allies among Christian neighbors, particularly Poland and the Ruthenians, who were also threatened by the growing military order. The conflict intensified. Lithuanian princes Kęstutis and Liubart led armies against the order, but the Knights repeatedly triumphed, strengthening their hold in the region. Even when Prince Kęstutis launched counterattacks, such as the raid culminating in the Battle of Rudaw, the Teutonic Knights prevailed again, inflicting heavy losses. In 1385, the balance began to shift. The Grand Duchy of Lithuania entered into the Union of Kreuo with the Kingdom of Poland. Grand Duke Jogaila converted Lithuania to Catholicism, married Queen Jadwiga of Poland, and united the two realms against the Knights. Yet the Teutonic Order, now one of the most powerful states in the Baltic, did not abandon its ambitions. Many of the cities they founded during this era remain important today. Danzig, Gdansk, Königsberg, Kaliningrad, and Elbląg. These fortified towns became centers of commerce, colonization, and administration for the Order's state, which at its peak dominated the southeastern Baltic. Tensions finally erupted into the Great War of 1409 to 1411, sparked by a rebellion in Samogitia, a disputed borderland. The Teutonic Knights declared war on Poland and Lithuania, setting the stage for one of the largest battles of medieval Europe, the Battle of Grunwald, Tannenberg, on July 15, 1410. The battle was monumental. The Polish-Lithuanian alliance, commanded by King Ladislaw II Jagiello and Grand Duke Vytautas, mustered nearly 39,000 troops, including Polish knights, Lithuanian cavalry, Ruthenian contingents, and mercenaries from across Europe. The Teutonic Order, under Grandmaster Ulrich von Jungingen, fielded around 27,000 soldiers, bolstered by Western European mercenaries and levies from their territories. At first, Vytautas's Lithuanian forces feigned retreat, luring the knights into a trap. Meanwhile, the Poles held firm against heavy cavalry assaults. When the moment came, Jagiello unleashed his reserves, including Tatar and Ruthenian units, on the knights' exposed flanks. In the chaos, Grandmaster Jungingen was killed, and the Teutonic army collapsed. Though the Allies failed to capture Marienburg, the Order's capital, the Battle of Grunwald, was a turning point in Prussia history. The once invincible Teutonic Order suffered devastating losses and never fully recovered its former power. The subsequent Peace of Thorn, 1411, forced the knights to cede territory and pay crippling reparations, while Poland and Lithuania emerged as dominant forces in Eastern Europe. Throughout the 15th century, the decline of the Order continued, driven by economic troubles, internal strife, and renewed wars. The most decisive of these was the 13 Years' War, a conflict that would permanently alter the political map of Prussia. The nobility, frustrated with high taxes and the increasingly centralized policies of the Teutonic Order, sought the support of Poland. This alliance proved decisive. Under the Second Peace of Thorn in 1466, Prussia was permanently divided. The western part, known as Royal Prussia, became a crown territory of the Kingdom of Poland. It included Gdansk, Pomerania, Tarunia, and Elbląg, cities that flourished as major trade hubs. While under Polish rule, Royal Prussia retained a significant degree of autonomy. It maintained its own laws, administration, and even its own mint, while still sending representatives to the Polish Sejm. This arrangement benefited both sides. The Polish crown avoided unnecessary conflict with the largely German-speaking elites, while the Prussian nobility preserved much of their influence. Gdansk in particular grew into the largest port of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, dominating Baltic commerce. The eastern part, known as the Duchy of Prussia, remained under the Teutonic Order but as a vassal of the Polish king. However, the Order's power had been fatally weakened by its defeats and internal divisions. Economic decline, political strife, and the rising influence of the Protestant Reformation further destabilized its rule. A turning point came in 1525, when Grandmaster Albert of Brandenburg-Ansbach, related to both the Polish royal family and the Hohenzollerns, embraced Lutheranism. He secularized the Order's lands, creating the Duchy of Prussia, and became its first duke. The Order effectively ceased to exist as a military religious institution. This act was confirmed by the Treaty of Krakow the same year, which kept the duchy as a vassal state of Poland. Albert worked actively on reforms, strengthening administration and revitalizing the economy, earning recognition as a capable statesman. But after his death in 1568, his son, Duke Albert Frederick, proved unable to rule effectively due to mental illness. With no male heirs, succession passed through his daughter Anna, who married into the Brandenburg-Hohenzollerns. In 1618, the duchy was formally united with Brandenburg under this powerful dynasty. This created a unique political situation. The Duchy of Prussia was still nominally a Polish vassal, while Brandenburg remained part of the Holy Roman Empire. Both vassalages, however, were largely symbolic, and the union strengthened Hohenzollern influence in Central Europe. When Frederick William, known as the Great Elector, came to power in 1640, he transformed Brandenburg-Prussia into a rising power. During the 30 Years' War, he carefully navigated alliances, supporting Sweden and France when advantageous, and emerged with expanded influence and new territories such as Magdeburg, Halberstadt, and Minden. Frederick William built one of the strongest armies in Europe and introduced strict military discipline. Alongside military reforms, he centralized governance, developed a robust bureaucracy, and improved taxation systems to sustain his campaigns. His policies earned him recognition among Europe's monarchs and allowed him to elevate the prestige of his realm. The Great Elector also sought to free Prussia from Polish overlordship. During the War of 1655 to 1660, known as the Swedish Deluge, he first allied with Sweden. After the decisive victory at the Battle of Warsaw in 1656, the Swedish king granted Frederick William full sovereignty over the Duchy of Prussia. But the Elector knew he also needed formal recognition from Poland. In 1657, he switched sides and signed the Treaty of Walo with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. In exchange for abandoning Sweden, he received full sovereignty over Prussia from the Polish crown. From that moment, the Duchy of Prussia became fully independent, setting the stage for its later rise as a kingdom. Meanwhile, Royal Prussia followed a different path. Its cities, Gdansk, Tarunia, and Elbląg, remained vital centers of Baltic trade, especially for the export of Polish grain to Western Europe. Gdansk, the wealthiest port in the Commonwealth, retained wide autonomy. Yet the region suffered heavily during the Swedish deluge, with towns occupied and devastated by Swedish forces. The Treaty of Oliva in 1660 restored order, but the economy took years to recover. Still, Gdansk remained one of Europe's most important trading hubs. Thus, by the mid-18th century, Prussia had risen from a modest duchy into a formidable European power. Its military reforms, disciplined governance, and ambitious rulers, especially Frederick the Great, secured its place as one of the continent's strongest kingdoms. The transformation of Prussia not only reshaped Central Europe but also set the stage for the struggles and alliances that would dominate the centuries to come. If you enjoyed uncovering the dramatic rise of Prussia, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to History Love, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the past. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which Prussian ruler do you think had the greatest impact on European history? History Love is your go-to YouTube channel for exploring the fascinating stories of the past.